The following program was recorded at the ARC Annual Industry Forum in Orlando, Florida. I'm pleased to welcome Editor-in-Chief of Supply Chain Brain, Russell Goodman.
Joining us for a conversation today on cybersecurity is Bob Mick, Vice President, Emerging Technologies at ARC Advisory Group. Welcome, Bob.
Thank you.
Bob, I guess we need a little background. Just why is it that ARC is involved in cybersecurity?
The ARC primarily does research around industries that have industrial control systems. And our clients, who actually have advisory service with us, that are mainly interested in how to secure their systems. And that's my area of research, actually. So up until the last couple of years, we primarily just advise them in general practices and capabilities. But more recently, we've established a new program, actually, one of which is a market outlook study, where we define the amount of money that's actually been spent on security components. Another thing is actually a strategy document that helps them to define what to go do. The last one is specifically around patch management, which is a relatively large problem for them.
Well, now, patch management, I must say, is a new term for me, so maybe it is for some of the viewers. What is it? Tell us all about that.
Patch management is kind of like a little bit of a side trip, but patch management is when there are vulnerabilities in software, usually derived from mistakes in the software that somebody externally can capitalize on. Those vulnerabilities get managed, the fixes to those vulnerabilities get managed by the actual owner-operators or the manufacturers themselves. It's a big problem because the techniques that you use for corporate systems won't work in industrial control systems.
Now, you also just mentioned a market outlook study. I guess my question is, hasn't all of this area been covered before?
That's a good question, actually. We have several competitors which are much larger than us, and they focus on IT in general, which is corporate level IT. And they do a lot of good work actually in sizing the markets for all that and defining what the spend is in those areas. But the problem there is that in order to do that for manufacturing businesses, you have to have information about the details of what goes on in the manufacturing facilities, and that's what ARC is actually an expert at. We have the information to do that from the bottom up rather than the top down.
Well, let's talk for a moment about the end users. Let's talk about manufacturers, utilities, and others. What motivates them to become involved in cybersecurity?
Well, that's boiled down to a few things in recent times, actually. The first one is risk. Manufacturers have a number of risks that you don't have in corporate systems. For example, safety, environmental impact. Those kind of things can actually be impacted by some sort of successful attack, so that you could actually dump raw sewage in a river, or you could do strange things, maybe even somebody get hurt. So risk is one business thing. Another one is compliance to regulations. The U.S. government, for example, and other governments are starting to impose regulations on these companies, and they have to comply. If they don't comply, they have penalties associated with that. The last one is the cost of security is relatively high. It's an opportunity for them to cut that cost rather than just to increase spend to deal with new requirements.
Well, you mentioned the cost being high. I mean, just what is the cost of addressing cybersecurity? What all is involved, and can just any company afford that?
Well, if you look at the corporate IT side, where most of my peer analysts have looked in, and you look at the total IT spend, which includes computers and all kinds of things that go on there, then the total IT spend is somewhere around $1.5 to $3 trillion a year. Of that, about 3 to 6% is actually for security. And if you compute that out, that comes out to right around $120 billion a year spent on security for corporate IT. Now, manufacturing systems are not in that total. They're somewhat less than that, but that's what we're actually going to look at in the research that we're doing this year.
You know, when we talk about cybersecurity, things like viruses and other internet attacks come to mind. These have been around a long time.
Yes.
Now, why have we not been able to get rid of these problems? How come we can't seem to reduce the risk of these things?
Well, we've actually reduced the risk for the ones we know about, but the problem is that there's new threats, new attack approaches, and those sorts of things that actually come about every day. So security is a very dynamic thing. You keep having to deal with new risks, you have to deal with new situations, you have to deal with new requirements from customers and suppliers as well as governments.
Well, speaking of government, that prompts me to hark back to something we talked about a little while ago: motivation for becoming involved in implementing, cybersecurity. You said that one of the reasons for doing that is government regulation. Well, what is government doing, by the way, to help businesses deal with their cybersecurity issues?
In the U.S., that kind of stems from the Department of Homeland Security. They have defined, I think it's 18 industries now that's critical infrastructure. And with those, in each of those industries, they've assigned an agency to actually work with that industry and develop roadmaps, guidance documents, and a number of other things that are actually useful by those industries. Now, they engage the industry in that process, actually. So the industry and DHS are developing those things jointly, actually.
Is this optional for businesses, or do they have a choice, or do they have to become involved with the government?
Participation is optional. They don't have to work with the DHS to develop those things. Once the regulations and compliance is required, then they have to participate at that point. There are penalties for that.
Well, are businesses responding to this optional program?
Absolutely. As far as participation is concerned, several of the largest companies have been investing in that for an awful long time, actually, and provided even some thought leadership in the area. It's not all government thought leadership. There's security experts in most all of our large companies now, if not all of our large companies, and the suppliers of products also have a number of security experts that contribute very heavily to the entire process.
Let's take a prospective look now at this point and talk about what's next in cybersecurity, what's coming in terms of threats, what's coming in terms of technology to help us deal with that. What do you see?
Well, there's a number of things that are happening. First, what's coming, one of the big things is these industries are not all at the same level of protection or with their security programs. So one of the things that I think the government is very interested in is making sure that those industries that are in the lead share information with those that are not in the lead. So that means that there's a sharing program, and the government would like to facilitate that sort of thing. As far as new threats, one of the things that's happening is that previously most of the threats were from viruses and maybe even casual hackers. Now that has first escalated into criminals. Criminals become much more directed at trying to make money at it, and now it's actually escalated to the government level. Well, government level raises the entire game an awful lot. One of the things it does is it really concentrates the brain power, so it gets the best of the best together. The other one is it's well-funded, obviously. So the other thing they can do is they're very directed in what they attack, which is something that we're just not really ready for now.
Well, I guess a final question. What's the takeaway here that you want to leave with the viewers about cybersecurity?
Well, quite often, and we saw that somewhat here at our own forum, is that there's not really a good appreciation for the seriousness of the situation. We can all be very comfortable with what's happening now. You get a virus here, a virus there, and there's damage to it and that sort of thing. There are some thefts that are very well known. But in fact, relative to manufacturing, it's something that manufacturers have to invest money in. So it's very important that they're aware of the trends in that area, aware of the risks, and implement programs that actually manage that.
Well, this has been a most interesting conversation. Bob, thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you.
Bob Mick, ARC Advisory Group, speaking with us today about cybersecurity. Thanks for watching.